Chapter 4. With Akshar reeling, and with the noble legion still seeking new conscripts and willing soldiers, Knight Warden William was not foolish enough to think he was ready for a full march on Hrafnfell. He returned with his forces to Akshar to begin planning their next move. This would prove essential to events to come. Firstly, the Orc forces were growing in strength and acting bizarre. It may come as a surprise to my listeners to learn this, especially those who have experience with Orcs or know of their war tactics. But the Orcs in this case were actually not engaging in full force against the people of Heathmoor. This goes against most known Orc tactics, as Orcs tend not to care about patience in war. In fact, in a full march towards the enemy, Orcs have been known to engage in regicidal acts to kill their own comrades in front of them, so that they can be closer to the violence. Why they were choosing to wait and consolidate is uncertain, and it's worthy of further investigation, but such inquiries are not relevant to this log. Instead, I'd like to turn our attention to where we left off previously in the halls of Hrafnfell. The Jarl Reynald, considered a wise and very competent leader of his people, had just learned of the actions taken by his youngest daughter, Yilda. As she had not done this with his consent, in fact she'd behaved in a manner that he'd specifically been against, the Jarl was now having a brief meeting with his two daughters. Yilda, of course, was in attendance, but so was Aella, his eldest daughter, and most likely to inherit the role of Jarl after Reynald's passing. This is an account of the meeting from Reynald's perspective.
I have ruled this land for 22 years. I have seen it change from a hostile, bitter land, always at war with the knights only a few dozen kilometers away, to a land of relative peace and separation from the war. Let the other Jarls mock my intent to evade battle if they wish, but it is for the sake of my people and my daughters, and I will accept the title of coward if it is for their sake. The All-Father values warriors, true, but he is still a father in the end, like myself. If a warrior cannot protect the ones he treasures, his battle skills are meaningless. So I sat upon the throne of Hrafnfell these 22 years, proud of my beautiful daughters and the peace I might provide for them. Until now, of course. Yilda stood before me, her face downcast as her scars, not fully healed, met me with deep red grins. Her eyes searched for words to tell me, and her tongue sought excuses. I knew what she would say, but it hardly mattered. "My foolish child," I snarled at her. "I suspect you do not know the true weight of your actions, or you might have thought before acting on them."
"Father," she pleaded, "I did not think carefully. I thought—"
"Then you're doubly foolish!" I bellowed back at her, rising from my throne, hands trembling with anger. "You have woken a sleeping wolf that was better left in its cave. Akshar is our closest neighbor. Though smaller than us, they are always a present threat. Why would you anger them? Why would you attack them with such a barbarism as to murder women and children? Where is your pride as a warrior? Did you forsake it? Did my lessons to you as a child mean nothing? Does the All-Father reward those so weak that they can't make their points without spilling the blood of innocents?"
"Father, the knights took innocent lives as well," Yilda argued quickly. "You saw the carnage by the river as I did. Dozens dead, mutilated."
"Do you believe the knights capable of such savagery?" I asked angrily.
"It's true. They are many things, but I've never known the Iron Legion to be capable of this,"
Aella finally spoke.
"Also, according to some witness reports, the assailants were not knights but demons or hobgoblins of some kind." "It's all superstition," Yilda argued. "Those people make up stories to deny the truth, to evade the facts that even our father will not entertain."
Yilda rounded on me quickly with a look of rage.
"The knights have deceived you, father. They have warred so viciously with Don Yoku that they expected you to lower your guard. Then, while our backs were turned, they struck at our home. They likely painted their armor green and struck with a new savagery to strike fear in our hearts. Have you already forgotten the barbarism of the Blackstone Legion and Apollyon when they led the Great Famine years ago?" Editorial note. Several key figures and names mentioned here that need explaining from our readers in the Inquisition. The Blackstone Legion was a legion of knights from Ashfeld led by a warrior named Apollyon with an ambition to rekindle the fires of war in Heathmoor. She had led her Blackstone Legion on an invasion of Valkenheim but had burned a storehouse and fortress meant for storing food. Her intent had been to starve the Vikings until they turned on each other. Yilda is likely referencing Apollyon in this great famine as a reminder that knights are crafty and very clever in how they lash out at their enemies, which isn't entirely untrue. It's not unheard of for the knights to fall back on underhanded tactics to win, though I think that few would have done what Apollyon did in this suggest situation. I'd also like to take this moment to address what Aella was referring to. The witness accounts of hobgoblins is a fair assessment to make about the sight of orcs, though hobgoblin is a word often referring to a small green-skinned troll of sorts. In point of fact, they are likely referring to a subspecies of orc known as a Gretchen. Gretchen are smaller than normal orcs, but are born in large numbers. They are relatively weak on their own and must work in bands or companies to be of any real threat. Referring to them as goblins would not be an inappropriate description. A small horde of Gretchen could lay waste to a small town easily. They are also very commendable scouts and trackers, as their senses are finely tuned. My hypothesis is that this band of Gretchen was sent by the orc war chief to scout Hrafnfell and return with news. They likely sacked the fishing village nearby because they were either spotted or were just bored.
"I sought justice," Yilda cried. "You sought revenge," I barked back.
"Are they not of like mind?" Yilda snapped.
I did not even have to answer her. The look on her face already showed she regretted those choice of words. "Justice is seeking righteousness in the face of wrong. Revenge is exchanging death for death. You have the tongue of a viper, child. I do not forget the actions of the Blackstone Legion, for I was there when they occurred," I remarked darkly. "But you forget your place, you foolish girl." I marched towards her now, putting my hand down on her injured shoulder, causing her to yelp and retract her arm quickly. But I held firm and showed the gnash just running down her shoulder blade to her back. "The knights repaid you in kind for your deeds, so I will not punish you. But this action will only lead to further pain for our people."
"Father, we can make this right."
"I will make this right, child," I retorted. "You will contemplate on the error of your ways, and you will rest. Though you are right. I'm not one to believe in superstitions. Knights do not massacre small villages and then abandon the place for no reason. I'd sooner suspect hobgoblins than knights of Akshire in this case."
"What will you do, father?"
Aella asked, speaking again. Now that was the question I dreaded answering, for the reports I'd received was clear that a new legion had been formed, a noble legion. Their commander was a night warden, which meant that he might be reasoned with.
A fair but misguided belief. Wardens are held to a higher standard than most knights, true, but even wardens can struggle to see compromise and deliberation as a useful tactic in dealing with Vikings.
"If there is an unknown enemy before us, we cannot afford to have another at our doorstep. We must contend with the enemy we know and hope they will be merciful. It is in their religious doctrines to show mercy, so my hope is that this Night Warden is the religious type."
In point of fact, he was. Night Warden William actually did attend Mass on regular occasions and was close friends with a priest who traveled with the Iron Legion as a sort of chaplain. "Then your plan is,"
Aella urged. I walked away from her and reached up to the wall behind my throne. There lay, glistening with promise, the weapons I'd accumulated through my years of war. I found the single-handed war axe, gilded with gemstone in the pommel, and I took it down, holding it like a babe in my hands. I then turned to Aella and held it out to her. "Aella, my daughter, I require you to take my axe and ride to Akshire so you may present it to the Night Warden of the Noble Legion." Aella leapt back from the axe with a furious cry of shock, and Yilda looked prepared to strike it from my hand as if I were holding a venomous snake.
"Have you gone mad, father?" Yilda cried. "You would show weakness to our enemy! You can't do this!"
"Be silent!" I bellowed back. Both of my daughters shrunk back. "What do you know of weakness or our enemy? You who would attack without cause or thought. You who seek blood for blood without thought or patience. You acted as a coward and a savage. You brought shame to our hall, and you have threatened us with the wrath of an injured beast. I will swallow my pride and down it with meat before I allow my people to fall!" I paused to catch my breath. Both Yilda and Aella speechless before me, neither moving but neither arguing. I quieted my voice slightly. "We face an enemy we do not know, and we have angered a sleeping one. I cannot risk the safety of our people by fighting both enemies at once. Hobgoblins or not, they were capable of destroying a village. I don't want to fight them as well as a Night Legion. I need to know the intentions and character of the Night Warden leading this new legion, and this is the only way I know how."
"Father,"
Aella spoke,
"I will do this, but why not send someone else like Gunnar? Or perhaps—"
She seemed uncomfortable, but not unwilling to take the axe. I simply sighed and shook my head at her. "It must be you, child. Were I to send someone less than my own flesh and blood, the message would lack value. I can't send Yilda, for any words she exchanges would fall on deaf ears. You are of sound mind and tongue. You I can trust with this task."
"And if they were to kill me where I stand?" she asked.
"He will not," I said firmly, more for my own confirmation than anything else. "His honor will not allow it. I'm certain of it. I was not, but how could I say that to my daughter who I was condemning to walk into hell for me and my people?" I felt tears in my weary eyes as she finally took the axe from my hands.
"What should I say to him? He might not understand the meaning of this message,"
Aella pointed out calmly but with a tremble behind her voice. "If he asks, answer as best you can. I'm sure he will have an interpreter at any rate. But I have a hunch no words need be exchanged between you." I closed my eyes and placed my hands on her shoulders. "Go with my blessing and the All-Father's gaze." As she left my sight, Yilda, now in tears of shame, began to walk away from me as well. My anger towards her faltered. I could not look at her without seeing the same child who had fallen into a bag of flour as a mere toddler and run around the hall white as a spirit. She was so wild, so without reservation. But she was still mine, and by the All-Father's mercy I loved her. "Child, why do you leave my sight?" I asked.
"I am unworthy, Father. I have done nothing but bring you pain and shame. I have, as you said yourself, behaved as a coward."
I approached her and brought my arm around her, holding her to my chest. "Yours is the strength of Thor and the ferocity of Freya. But you lack wisdom, young one. There is a time for your gifts, but it is not yet. Not yet."
"So how can I find favor in your heart, Father? How can I be of use to you?"
She began to cry, shaking like a newborn in the cold. I kissed the crown of her head and allowed her to sob into my shoulder. She was still my little girl, covered in flour. "You are of use to me just by being, Yilda. Just by being."
Editorial note. I should explain here what the message Jarl Reinald is sending means, as to my readers in the Inquisition, this gifting of a simple axe must seem rather strange. In point of fact, this is actually a peace offering. In the ancient days of Valkenheim, the Viking clans and tribes often engaged in war with each other for land and resources. In the event that hostilities were expected or possible between two clans, one Jarl might send his axe or other prized weapon to the rival Jarl as a gift. If the rival accepts the axe, then it means they accept the message and there will be no war between them. But if the Jarl sends the axe back, then it means they reject the peace offering and war will ensue. Under normal circumstances, and if this were being done with another Jarl, this action would be seen as an old-fashioned, but commendable. And this was certainly not in normal circumstances, I'm sure my readers will appreciate. The idea of doing this for a foreigner, an enemy outside of Valkenheim, would be seen as nothing short of insulting to their culture and customs. It would be seen, by the other Jarls at least, that Hrafnfell was admitting its weakness to the knights and begging for mercy to be shown on them by their sworn enemy. Not only this, but sending Aella as the messenger was also a dangerous gamble. In Valkenheim, one does not kill the messenger who bears the axe. It is seen as rude and dishonorable, but knights might not see it this way, and there's no telling what they might do to her. Seeing as Aella was picked to be the next Jarl, Reinald is quite literally putting Hrafnfell in the hands of Night Warden William. I, for one, have trouble seeing the wisdom in his plan, but clearly Reinald did. As well, here we are. For now, however, I feel it necessary that we should take a break from Hrafnfell and the Noble Legion and discuss some going-ons in another part of the area. The Maya, as you'll recall, was the initial landing ground of the Orcs. This is where the Orcs were growing the most and fierce, and already battles were underway in the swampy territory, forcing the samurai to retreat inland. The Emperor at this point could no longer ignore these reports of giant green Oni attacking from the mist, and finally deciding it was time to take action. The following is a letter recovered from the Emperor to a very important daimyo in this log, Naka no Tomoe. a young daimyo of Amaku province. From a letter to Daimyo Nakano Tomoe.
To my faithful Hatamoto, Nakano, I pray this letter finds you in good health and spirits. It is with a most heavy heart that I write to inform you of a terrible tragedy to befall our country. Our southern province of Josei and Hyoto have fallen to the Green Menace, of which I am sure you've already heard legend of. I had dismissed their existence at first, but no longer. Their presence is now a known phenomenon to our people, and they grow in strength daily. I am in need of your aid. I have dispatched a message to the daimyo of Donyoku, Jubei, to disengage the Iron Legion and lend his support to fight back the Oni. I wish for you to meet him in Donyoku and join his battle lines. With your combined might, I am confident you will be able to turn back these monsters and save our people. I ask that you make haste the minute you receive this letter. I do not know if we can afford even the time it would take for this letter to reach you. These monsters are not natural. They are inhuman. I hesitate to admit that I would not wish their barbarity on even the knights or Vikings. I have seen trophies reclaimed of heads, limbs, and other things unmentionable from the bodies of the slain. They are most disgusting and horrifying beasts. We cannot let these Oni overtake us. I know you will not fail me in this. To your health, Emperor Koreto Minji.
This letter was received well after the orcs had claimed nearly a tenth of the Maya's territory and were growing rapidly. Daimyo Tomoe rallied her forces immediately and began her march southwest to join forces with the daimyo of Donyoku, Jubei. Unfortunately, the meeting would not go the way she wanted it at all. It would also be met with interference from the knights in a manner that, I freely admit, will sound quite amusing without proper context. It was also at about this point, as the Vikings are reaching out to the knights and the samurai are attempting to bolster their defenses, that I returned to the scene. I would return to the planet to find Heathmore in the early stages of an orc uprising. And it was only the beginning. The situation was about to get worse. Much, much worse.